So looking at example 4, now suddenly there are multiple transversals. Note that A is a transversal for C and D, but wait, there's more. B is also a transversal for C and D. You could also look at this diagram such that D is a transversal for A and B. So now we actually have multiple transversals. There's a lot more going on in this diagram than the previous two. So we're going to take a deep breath. It's all going to be okay. We're going to just point out these angles, 5 and 13. So it's helpful when you have a complicated diagram to take a second and just ask yourself, well, what's the transversal? Notice that those two angles, B is cutting up C and D. So B is my transversal in this case. 5 and 13 are the angles that I care about. So with respect to that transversal B, they're on the same side, but one is interior and one is exterior. The vocab word for that is corresponding, because they're in the same position relative to each other. They're both in that top left corner. Those are our corresponding angles. Let's jump down to 7 and 14. Those are no longer corresponding. You can get rid of the boxes. Same transversal we were just looking at. B is our transversal there. They are on opposite sides of the transversal, but between line C and D. So those are alternate because they're on opposite sides, interior because they're between the lines. Let's look at 3 and 6. Suddenly my transversal has changed. B is no longer the transversal. So now B and C, what line are they both on? They're both on line C. So C is our transversal. A and B are the lines being cut, being intersected. So 3 and 6 are on opposite sides of my transversal, my red transversal there. They're both outside, so they are alternate, exterior. Let's look at 9 and 14. So we have 9 and 14. 9 and 14 are on the same side of transversal D. And note they are both outside of the lines being intersected, A and B. So 9 and 14, those will be consecutive because they're on the same side. Exterior because they're outside of my two lines. 4 and 7. So the same two lines being intersected, but I need to change my transversal. My transversal is now line C there. So 4 and 7 are on the same side, so they are consecutive, and they're between the two lines, so they'll be consecutive interior. 2 and 10. 2 and 10, we do need to change our transversal here. Now A is the transversal, go ahead and leave it blue, and C and D are the lines being intersected. This is another case where if you try to use interior and exterior, it falls apart a little bit because 2 is exterior but 10 is interior. This is where it's helpful to draw in that box. And note that they're both in the top right corner. So they are corresponding angles in the same position. So let's look at 8 and 14. 8 and 14 is our next case. My transversal is now B. Well, they're on the same side of B, and they're between lines C and D, so they are consecutive for same side, interior because they're on the inside. Let's look at a couple of trick questions. Look at angle 6 and 11. Jumping down now to 6 and 11. Notice that they're not on the same transversal. You could look at 6, well maybe B is the transversal we care about, maybe C is the transversal we care about. If I jump down to 11, is A the transversal I care about? Is D the transversal I care about? Oh. There's no relationship here. 6 and 11 don't share a transversal, so we can't use any of the vocab. So not every angle will be relatable to every other angle, especially when our diagrams get more complicated. 4 and 13 share the same problem. Notice that there's no one transversal that both of those angles lie on. So we can't do anything with 4 and 13. Once again, we have no relationship. So let's end on a happy note where we do have a relationship. 4 and 9 do share a transversal. It's A. Note that they're on opposite sides of that transversal, so they're alternate. And because they're between lines C and D, they're interior. So ending with one that does work for us. So that's example 4. At this point, you are good to go ahead and try some of those practice problems, taking a look at those angles, identifying what the relationship is. When we come back tomorrow, we'll start putting some numbers into these diagrams, and we'll be able to do a little bit of algebra in the next couple of days using these relationships. But for now, we just want you to be able to identify what is alternate, what is consecutive, what is corresponding, and so on. See you soon.